Peace be upon you, brothers and sisters. This is Said Mirza from ReasonNotReason.com, and today I wanted to look what the Quran has to say about hijab, to see that what God commands us to do, not what the sheikhs and muftis and imams are commanding us to do. And I think the best way to go about this is to first look at the word hijab in the Quran, because if you look in the Quran for this word hijab, you will see that it never refers to the head covering for women or a piece of garment. That is a verifiable fact. So we're going to look at the verses in the Quran for this word hijab, and then I'm going to look into the specific verses that talk about dressing modestly. Obviously, this is a requirement in the Quran, is that you just have to go into the text of the Quran itself to look at what it's talking about. You don't have to rely on sheikhs, muftis, and imams for their interpretations that change depending on who's funding them. So let's look at Brother Gann's translation here. This is on reader.quranic.com. This is the Quran, a complete revelation. It's available for free. It's a great resource. So what I did was I looked at the root letters Ha, Jin, Ba, from which the word hijab is made up, and then I filtered by that word. So there are 7 verses that talk about this hijab. So let's just go through them quickly. Chapter 7, verse 46, and between them is a partition, and upon the elevations are men recognizing each by their mark, and they will call to the companions of the garden, peace be upon you. They have not entered it, though they desire to. So here in Arabic it says, وَبَيْنَهُمَا hijabun. So this is a partition. It's a separation, nothing to do with a woman's head covering. Next one, chapter 17, verse 45. And when thou recitest the Quran, we place between thee and those who believe not in the hereafter a hidden hijaban, partition again. You can even look at other translations and you'll see that they're translating it is in the proper manner. Arbery translates this as a curtain. Sahih International translates this as a partition, a concealed partition, and Hilali in Khan translate this as an invisible veil. Masturan is the hidden part, so veil. So he's trying to twist this a little bit to because I told you earlier that these translators, Hilali Khan specifically, they are funded by the Saudi government, so they are pushing a brand of Islam that's not found in the Quran. So obviously they're going to try to translate that word in a manner that is more in line with the understanding that hijab means woman's head covering. Next one, chapter 19, verse 17. So she separated herself from them. Then we sent to her our spirit, and he appeared to her as a mortal without fault. This is obviously referring to Mary. She left her people here. So it says, so she separated herself from them. And again, the word hijaban is used. You cannot say that this means that she donned a head covering. Next one, chapter 33, verse 53. O you who heed warning, enter not the houses of the prophets, save that leave be given to you for a meal, without watching for its hour. But when you are called, then enter, and when you have eaten, then disperse. And seek not to remain for conversation that hinders the prophet, and he is shy of you. But God is not shy of the truth. And when you ask of his wives an item, ask it of them from behind a partition. That is pure for your hearts and their hearts, and it is not for you to hinder the messenger of God, or to marry his wives after him ever, that were in the sight of God monstrous. So again, the partition is used in the sense of a curtain, some barrier between prophets' wives and the believers. Chapter 38, verse 32. He said, I have loved the love of good out of remembrance of my Lord until it disappeared behind the partition. This is referring to Solomon, and this is referring to the sun, that the sun basically set until it disappeared behind the partition. You can actually go in each verse here and look up the context if you wish as well. It's a pretty cool tool. Next one, chapter 41, verse 5. And they say, upon our hearts are coverings against that to which thou invitest us, and in our ears is deafness, and between us and thee is a partition. Then work thou, we are working. Again, hijabun. 42:51. And it is not for a mortal that God should speak to him save by revelation, or from behind a partition, or that he send a messenger, and that he reveal by his leave what he wills. He is exalted and wise. Obviously, here the partition is a barrier, again, nothing to do with the woman's head covering. And specifically, if you remember in the story of Moses, Musa, God spoke to him from the fire. So that was the partition, the fire. Okay, so those are all the verses that have the word hijab in them. This is a verifiable fact. No one can say that there are other verses that have the word hijab, and you see in all of them, it's not referring to a headscarf or the dress of a woman. Now, there are obviously commandments in the Quran that have to deal with clothing and garments, and we shall look at it now. This is from my newly released book, The Writ of God in the Quran, guidance for the God-fearing. And this book is available for free on my website, williamreason.com. And we're just going to be looking at this specific section of the chapter. I think the chapter is called Modesty, chapter 11. So let's just go through this real quick. This is chapter 24, verses 30 through 31. Say thou to the believing men that they lower some of their sight and preserve their chastity. That is pure for them. God is aware of what they do. And say thou to the believing women that they lower some of their sight and preserve their chastity, and that they show not their adornment, save that apparent of it, and that they draw their coverings over their bosoms, and not reveal their adornment save to their husbands, or their fathers, or the fathers of their husbands, or their sons, or the sons of their husbands, or their brothers, or the sons of their brothers, or the sons of their sisters, or their women, or what their right hand possessed, or male attendants who have not the resourcefulness of men, or the children not yet aware of a woman's private parts, and let them not strike their feet to make known what they hide of their adornment, and turn to God altogether, O believers, that you might be successful. Now we're going to do a breakdown of this verse, because we really need to do a breakdown of things and not just take the Sheikh at his word, really. Okay, so first of all, I want to look at the footnotes here. So first, it says to and preserve their chastity. What does that mean? Arbery translates this as guard your private parts, guard their private parts. So it's self-explanatory, do not engage in sexual immorality or fornication. You're supposed to guard your parts. This is the plain reading. Okay. Next one, adornment. What does that mean? Now, for that word, you need to go in the Quran and look at what this word means. The verses I've cited are a good example of what this word means, adornment, which in Arabic is zinat. And really what the word zinat is, if you look at through all these verses, you will see that it's referring to beautification, finery. God says that we adorn the lower heaven with the stars. And also we created on the earth adornment for it. This is talking about the herbage, the vegetation, anything that gives something beauty. This is what the word means. Okay, so next one. And let them not strike their feet to make known what they hide of their adornment. Now in the footnotes I write, they should not walk in this manner, as it will draw male attention to them. Now let's look at the points. We're going to cover them individually. While the above is used to justify the Islamic head and face covering, which is the hijab and niqab respectively, a careful reading yields the following points. Number 1, believing men and women must lower their eyes and preserve their chastity, that is, guard their private parts. Number 2, believing women should cover their bosoms. And the reason is that this word, in the Quran, if you look in the dictionary, this word is used, Lane Lexicon defines this as the opening of a shirt or at the uttermost part of the breast. In modern parlance, we would say to cover your cleavage. Okay, this is what the word means. Now, this is point 3. Believing women should not reveal their adornment except to their husbands or their fathers, or the fathers of their husbands, or their sons, or the sons of their husbands, or their brothers, or the sons of their brothers, or the sons of their sisters, or their women, or what their right hands possess, or male attendants who have not the resourcefulness of men, or the children not yet aware of a woman's private parts. Now, what their right hands possess, um, if you look in the Quran, that's referring to slaves, someone you have power over, and or male attendants now who have not the resourcefulness of men. Again, we don't want to get tied up into this thing because for a common believer, run-of-the-mill believer, there you don't have slaves and you don't have these men in service, but you do have other people who are with the believing woman, the father-in-law, their uncles, etc. So the Quran is giving you guidance in that matter. Now, point 4 is believing women should not strike their feet to make known what they hide of their adornment. That is, they are not to walk in a sexually provocative manner. If you notice, you go to shopping malls, etc., you're going to see women wearing heels, high heels, and they're going to be walking provocatively. And obviously, you can make out their figure. So, this is referring to that. This makes sense. Also, in older times, women wore anklets. This is not something that happened in the West, but in the East, women still wear anklets. And, if they're wearing heavy jewelry, then if they walk in a certain manner, you can hear the clinking, right? So this is, you just have to kind of use these guidelines in a practical manner and try to understand what does that mean. Well, what's the conclusion? The incessant nitpicking of God's commands in chapter 24, 31, and 32 by Muslims is unfortunately a symptom of a disease in their hearts. And what is that disease? We read in chapter 3 verse 7, he it is that sent down upon thee the writ, among it are explicit proofs, they are the foundation of the writ, and others are ambiguous. Then as for those in whose hearts is deviation, they follow what is ambiguous thereof, seeking the means of denial, and seeking its interpretation, and no one knows its interpretation save God and those firm in knowledge. They say, we believe in it, all is from our Lord, but only those of insight take heed. So Muslims are, unfortunately, because there's a disease in their hearts, they routinely ignore major and clear portions of God's writ while quibbling over commands which God has left intentionally ambiguous. The reason for the ambiguity present in chapter 24 verses 31 and 32 is to allow for flexibility in the implementation in different societies and times. This is really what it's all about. Throughout the ages, different societies, they have different ideas of what, covering your shame is, of modesty. So the Quran is giving us a little bit of leeway on how to implement this. And we're going to be seeing a command that is allowing for that flexibility. Finally, a believing woman would do well to work on purifying her heart and being genuinely modest. God knows what is in the hearts. Now, what I'm referring to here is the fact, which I see quite a lot in the West, that the girls, they are wearing the hijab really tightly around their heads, but for all intents and purposes, they are still walking around as the Western women. They have tight-fitting jeans, they have makeup on, and they have perfume on, and they're wearing bracelets and jewelry, etc., etc. Really, there is no difference between a hijabi woman and a blonde woman, except for the fact that they have this scarf on. So this is the point. I mean, if your heart is corrupt, then you can dress up in that manner, and your heart is still corrupt. Now, the command to draw down garments, this is something that the traditionalist likes to talk about quite a bit, and he uses this as a justification for the woman to wear a full length dress. Well, let's see what this means in the context of the Quran. So this is chapter 33, verses 57 through 62. Those who hinder God and his messenger, God has cursed them in the world and the hereafter, and has prepared for them a humiliating punishment. And those who hinder believing men and believing women with what they have not earned, they bear a calumny and obvious sin. O Prophet, say thou to thy wives, and thy daughters, and the women of the believers, that they draw down over them some of their garments, that will tend to them being recognized and not hindered, and God is forgiving and merciful. If the waverers desist not, and those in whose hearts is disease, and the spreaders of lies in the city, we will impel thee against them. Then will they not be your neighbors therein save a little, ones cursed wherever they are found, taken, and comprehensively killed. The practice of God among those who passed away before, and thou wilt not find for the practice of God any replacement. Okay, so I want to look at the footnotes here. Okay, so where it said that they draw down over them some of their garments, I take that to mean that is, but against takes that to mean that they should lengthen their garments. And um, yeah, footnote point 232 we're going to cover anyway. Okay, so now we're going to do a bit of analysis of this verse. Okay, this is important. You can't just take some verse out from some place and then just say, hey, this is what God commands. Let's look at the context. So, contextual reading, which is imperative in order to understand the commands of God, leaves no doubt that the command for the believing woman to draw down over them some of their garments was for the express purpose of being recognized as believing women and left alone by men on that basis. This solution was for the specific problem of the waverers harassing believing women during the time of the messenger and using the excuse that they did not recognize them to be believing women. So this was the context, and that's why this command came. Now, in today's time, the reverse is the case. Women who wear the niqab and hijab are more likely to be harassed due to rampant Islamophobia in the West. A believing woman living in the West would be better served wearing conservative clothing rather than the symbolic Islamic attire, as it only serves to attract unwanted attention and enrage the general ignorant public. What I'm trying to say here is that by you putting on, a headscarf or doing the full face covering, the niqab, you are only making yourself a target. And it's not because we should be scared of the unbelievers or the atheists or anything like that. This is just common sense, that you should not draw unwanted attention. And in the case of the woman, this is the reason for the conservative clothing in the first place. So you can definitely wear conservative clothing, but by you putting on this Islamic clothing that is a symbol, really, you are just making your life more difficult. I'm not saying you should do it or not. That's not my business. Really, what I'm trying to show you is how the word hijab is used in the Quran. It's never used to refer to woman's clothing or piece of clothing. And also, I'm looking at the commandments of God in the Quran, where nowhere it mentions to cover your hair or cover your face. And that word adornment is open for interpretation, and there's a reason for that. So, ultimately, this is the guidelines that you have. And you will notice in God's word that God gives us a lot of flexibility on how to implement his commandments. Brother Gans always used to say in his videos, he said that, it's a broad river, and then there's the banks, and the banks are the hududul Allah, the frontiers or the limits of God. Okay, so this is which you cannot transgress, but you can swim in that river because God's writ, it is a prescription for the end of times. I mean, there's no revelation that's going to be coming after this. So obviously it allows for flexibility. And we do a great disservice to God's word and to the Quran if we take these verses and make them very narrow and define them with the hadith literature, because then what we end up with is, 7th century Islam, and that every woman should dress up as an Arab woman, because that was how they dressed, that was their custom. This is not what the Quran is saying. Anyway, like I said, the book is available online, and I've gotten some feedback from people saying that it's not available on Amazon. Unfortunately, I don't really control that aspect of the distribution. The publisher has made that book available on Amazon, and you should be able to get it from Amazon. If you're not able to get it, then that's how these things work. Maybe it might show up later. But regardless, you can always download this book for free and print it out. No one's stopping you from doing that. I mean, I encourage you to do that instead of giving your money to Jeff Bezos. Go ahead and print it out and read it. And really what it is a compilation of verses from the Quran, a complete revelation, which is translated by the Garans, and I've made comments on that and compiled the word of God, so it's easier for study and for reflection and ultimately implementation. Anyway, that's it for now. God willing, until next time, peace and blessings be upon you.